Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that almost everything you believe, you didn't actually choose. Your opinions on politics, your taste in music, what you think success looks like, even your idea of right and wrong. What if most of it was just absorbed, copied, downloaded from the people around you, without you ever running a background check on where it came from? There was a philosopher who looked at humanity and saw exactly this. He called most of us the herd, not as an insult to make you feel small, but as a diagnosis, a warning, and also a challenge. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche. And today, we're going to use his ideas to answer one of the hardest questions a human being can ask. How do you actually think for yourself? Stay till the end, because Nietzsche's answer is not what you expect. It's not just be different. It's something much harder and much more rewarding. Let's get into it. Friedrich Nietzsche was a 19th century German philosopher, and honestly, he lived a fairly quiet, unremarkable life on the surface. A professor, a sickly man, someone who was largely ignored while he was alive. But inside his head was one of the most explosive, uncompromising minds in the history of thought. He didn't write philosophy the way most philosophers did, with dry arguments and dusty logic. He wrote like a poet swinging a hammer. He wanted to smash comfortable illusions, especially the ones people didn't even know they were carrying. And one of his favorite targets? The herd. Not sheep, not cattle. Us. Human beings. Moving in packs, thinking in packs, believing in packs. While each person quietly assumes they're an independent thinker, Nietzsche's whole project can be summed up in one blunt question. Are you actually living your life, or are you just running someone else's program? That question is exactly what we're exploring today. Let's define this properly, because it's more subtle than people think. Herd mentality isn't just following trends or wearing what's popular. That's the shallow version. Nietzsche was pointing at something much deeper, what he called herd morality. The idea that entire societies inherit a shared set of values and then mistake those values for eternal universal truth, when really they were built by history, by fear, by convenience, and by power. Think about it this way. You didn't sit down one day and rationally derive your beliefs about what's good and bad, what's successful and a failure, what's normal and weird. You absorbed them from your family, your school, your religion, your culture, and now, especially, from social media. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most people never question any of it. They just accept the inherited script and perform it for their entire lives, convinced the whole time that it was their own idea. Nietzsche called this the morality of the herd. Safe, comfortable, unchallenged, and in his eyes, deeply unexamined. He wasn't saying society is evil. He was saying most people never even ask why they believe what they believe. And that unexamined life, to him, wasn't really a life at all. It was sleepwalking. Here's the part that makes this genuinely fascinating, instead of just insulting. Nietzsche didn't think people were stupid for following the herd. He thought it was almost inevitable, because herd thinking is comfortable, and comfort is seductive. 3 reasons why we default into it. Number 1, safety. Thinking for yourself is exhausting and risky. If you question the group's beliefs, you risk rejection, ridicule, even isolation. The herd offers protection. Nietzsche believed most people quietly choose social safety over intellectual honesty, without even realizing they're making that trade. Number 2, effort. Original thought takes work. It's far easier to borrow an opinion from a YouTube video, a headline, or a group chat than to sit with a hard question until you actually understand it. The herd hands you pre-packaged conclusions, and most people take the shortcut. Number 3, identity. Belonging to a group, a political tribe, a fandom, a religion, an online community, gives people an instant sense of who they are. Nietzsche saw this as one of the herd's cleverest tricks. It doesn't just give you beliefs, It gives you an identity built entirely on those beliefs. So questioning the belief starts to feel like questioning your own existence. Put those three together: safety, ease, identity, and you get an incredibly powerful current. Most people are simply swimming with it their entire lives, never realizing there was staying in the herd. Isn't it just easier? Nietzsche's answer is brutal. Yes, it's easier. And that's exactly the problem. He believed that a person who never questions their inherited values never truly becomes themselves. They live out a kind of borrowed life, wearing opinions like a uniform, instead of building a worldview from their own experience, reasoning, and courage. He described most people as living reactively, shaped entirely by outside forces, never actively shaping their own values. And over time, this creates a quiet kind of resentment. Nietzsche called it ressentiment, a simmering bitterness that comes from living a life you didn't choose, blaming the world instead of taking responsibility for your own becoming. This is why herd thinkers are often the loudest people online. Furious, reactive, quick to judge. Not because they're evil, but because they're carrying a life's worth of unexamined frustration, and it has to go somewhere. Nietzsche's warning is simple. The herd doesn't just cost you originality. It costs you your vitality, your capacity to actually feel alive, awake, and in command of your own existence. Okay, so how do you actually escape it? This is where Nietzsche gets genuinely useful, not just diagnostic. His answer isn't reject everything the herd believes and do the opposite. That's not freedom. That's just herd thinking in reverse. If your entire identity is built on opposing the crowd is still controlling you. Real independence, for Nietzsche, comes through a concept he called self-overcoming. Self-overcoming means treating your own beliefs, habits, and values as a work in progress, something you actively test, challenge, and rebuild, rather than something fixed you inherited and defend forever. He imagined the ideal human not as someone born fully independent, but as someone who becomes independent through a difficult ongoing process of questioning themselves relentlessly. He famously described 3 stages of the human spirit. The first is the camel, the burden carrier. This is the herd stage. You accept duty, tradition, and inherited values because that's what you're taught to do. You say, "I should," to everything. The second is the lion. This is the rebellion stage. The lion says, "I will," instead of "I should." It fights against inherited authority. It destroys old values. This is necessary. You cannot build a self without first clearing away what was handed to you. But the lion, on its own, can only destroy. It cannot yet create. The third, and hardest, is the child. The child represents a new beginning, innocence, playfulness, and most importantly, the ability to create new values from a place of freedom rather than rebellion. The child says, "I am," and from that place builds a life that is genuinely, authentically its own. Most people never leave the camel stage. Some make it to the lion, the angry rebel, defined by what they're against. Very few reach the child, the person secure enough to create their own values without needing to perform their independence for anyone. That third stage, the child, is what escaping the herd actually looks like. So let's bring this down to earth. What does self-overcoming look like in your actual daily life? Here are the principles Nietzsche's philosophy points us toward. First, interrogate your shoulds. Every time you catch yourself thinking, "I should want this job," "I should believe this," "I should look like this," stop and ask, whose voice is that? Is it truly yours, or is it borrowed? You don't have to reject it, but you do have to own it, consciously choose it, or consciously replace it. Second, seek discomfort, not just difference. Real growth doesn't come from being edgy or contrarian for attention. It comes from sitting with ideas that genuinely challenge you, reading philosophers you disagree with, listening to people outside your bubble, testing your convictions under real pressure instead of just performing confidence about them. Third, create instead of just critique. This is the leap from lion to child. It's easy to tear things down, to mock, to criticize, to expose the herd. It's much harder to build your own values, your own standards, your own vision of a life well lived. Nietzsche respected destruction only as a stepping stone. The goal was always creation. Fourth, embrace solitude. Nietzsche believed that real independent thought requires distance from the noise, deliberate time away from the crowd's opinions, the algorithm's suggestions, the group chat's consensus. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's where your own voice finally gets loud enough to hear. Nietzsche had a phrase for this: amor fati, love of one's fate. Instead of resenting your circumstances, your mistakes, your unchosen beginnings, you take radical ownership of them. You say, "This happened, and I will make something powerful out of it." That single shift, from victim of your story to author of your story, is, in many ways, the entire exit door out of the herd. Before we close, one honest warning, because Nietzsche himself gave it. Escaping the herd is not comfortable. It is not a lifestyle brand. It will cost you relationships, certainty, and the easy comfort of belonging. Some people around you will not like the version of you that stops needing their approval. Nietzsche never promised this path would make you happy in the shallow sense. He promised something rarer, that it would make you real, awake, the author of your own values, instead of a character in someone else's script. And he'd also warn you against a trap. Don't turn individualism into a new herd. If your independence is really just membership in the I'm not like other people crowd, you haven't escaped anything. You've just joined a smaller herd with better marketing. True independence is quiet. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is, built through years of honest self-examination, not through a single dramatic act of rebellion. So here's the real question Nietzsche leaves us with, and I want you to actually sit with it after this video ends. If you stripped away everything you were taught to believe, every should, every inherited opinion, every borrowed identity, what would actually be left? And would you have the courage to build something real in its place? That's not a comfortable question. It's not supposed to be. But it might be the most important one you ever ask yourself. If this video made you think, even a little differently than you did 15 minutes ago, that's exactly what Nietzsche would have wanted. Not agreement, not followers, just a mind waking up. If you want to go deeper into Nietzsche's philosophy, his ideas on the Übermensch, the will to power, and how to build real meaning without relying on comfortable illusions, let me know in the comments. And subscribe, because we're just getting started. Until next time, stay awake, stay honest, and dare to think for yourself.